I had dreamed of my wedding day since I was a little girl. Every time I saw a bride on TV, walking down the aisle with a glowing smile and a white gown that seemed to float in the air, I imagined myself in her place. The soft lace veil, the scent of lilies, the delicate shimmer of chandeliers above a dance floor filled with laughter. It was the image that carried me through every heartbreak, every disappointment, every moment I doubted whether love was ever meant for me. So when I finally met Ethan, and he proposed to me under the autumn sky with a trembling smile and a ring that reflected the sunset, I knew my fairy tale had finally begun. My wedding wasn't just a day to me. It was a symbol of years of patience, a celebration of a woman who had finally found peace and belonging. And at the center of that dream was the dress. It took me months to find it. I had visited more boutiques than I could count, scrolling through catalogs late into the night, until I found one that made my heart stop. An ivory silk gown, handcrafted with intricate lace around the neckline, a sweeping train that shimmered faintly when light touched it, and delicate embroidery around the waist that gave it an ethereal grace. It wasn't flashy. It was timeless, elegant. I remember standing in front of the mirror during the fitting, running my hands over the fabric, tears welling in my eyes because it felt like me. The woman in that mirror wasn't the uncertain girl who used to doubt her worth. She was confident, radiant, and ready to walk into a new chapter of her life. My sister, Clara, stood beside me that day. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "It's nice," she said, her tone clipped, almost as if the word nice were too generous. "That was Clara for you. Beautiful, sharp-tongued, and impossible to please." Growing up, she had always been the one who turned heads. She was my mother's pride, my father's soft spot. I was the quiet one, the planner, the one who studied hard and rarely rebelled. Clara was spontaneous, charming, the kind of woman people followed without question. But with all her beauty came an insatiable hunger to always be the center of attention. When she learned that Ethan came from an affluent family, I saw the change immediately. She started asking about his friends, his career, and his house. She'd accidentally join our dinners, laugh a little too loudly at his jokes, and compliment him as though she were auditioning for approval. I told myself it was harmless. Sisters get curious, right? But somewhere deep down, something cold began to settle in my chest. 2 weeks before the wedding, everything changed. I had been counting down the days, finalizing the seating charts, picking out flowers, and revising every tiny detail that could go wrong. My excitement had me glowing, the kind of happiness that even Clara's indifference couldn't dim. That morning, I went to the boutique to pick up my dress. The designer greeted me warmly. "Oh, your sister already came by to get it," she said casually. I froze. "My sister?" "Yes. She said you were busy with arrangements and sent her in your place." "She was so polite." I felt my stomach twist. "Clara?" She had no reason to be near that boutique, let alone pick up my dress. "When did she take it?" I asked, but my voice came out faint. "Yesterday morning. She said she'd deliver it to your house." I thanked her mechanically and stumbled out of the shop. My hands trembled as I called Clara. No answer. I tried again. Then again. I sent messages, voicemails, and even begged her to call me back. Silence. By evening, I was pacing the living room, panic clawing at my throat. Ethan noticed immediately, but I couldn't bring myself to tell him the truth. Not yet. I didn't want to believe what my heart already knew. 3 days later, Clara appeared at our parents' house glowing. Literally glowing. She walked in like a movie star, her nails perfectly manicured, her hair styled in effortless waves. "You look happy?" I managed to say, forcing a smile. She grinned and held out her hand. On her finger was a ring. "I'm getting married!" The room fell silent. My parents gasped, my mother squealed in delight, and my father clapped his hands. "To whom?" he asked. She hesitated just long enough to make me uneasy. "Luke," she said finally. It took me a moment to process it. "Luke? Ethan's best friend. The man who had helped Ethan plan our engagement dinner. The man who had spent countless evenings with us talking about our future." My mind reeled. "You're marrying Luke?" I repeated. "Yes." she chirped. It was so sudden, but we just knew. Love can't wait, right? My mother clapped her hands again. 2 weddings. What a blessing. But I couldn't speak. My heart pounded, my breath shallow. When? I asked quietly. Clara smiled, her eyes glinting with mischief. Same day as yours, I stared at her. What? Oh, come on, don't be dramatic, she said, laughing lightly. It's perfect. We can share the day, the guests, and the decorations. Everyone will love it. It'll be double the celebration. I felt the world tilt. My voice trembled as I said, Clara, this isn't a game. You took my wedding dress. She cut me off with a shrug. I borrowed it. You'll get it back after my ceremony. Her tone was casual, but her eyes told another story. This wasn't about love. This was about me. About stealing the one thing she couldn't stand to see me have, attention. I looked at my parents, desperate for support, but my mother only smiled. Oh, honey, don't be selfish. It's not every day 2 daughters get married together. Think of the photos. Think of the joy. I wanted to scream, to ask why my happiness had to be shared, why I was always expected to give way to Clara. But I swallowed the words because I knew no one would take my side. They never had. That night, I sat alone in my room, staring at the empty hanger where my dress once hung. My reflection in the window looked nothing like a bride. It looked like a fool. My hands clenched into fists. I replayed every moment of my life where I had stepped aside for Clara. Every stolen opportunity, every backhanded compliment. Every time I was told to be the mature one, something inside me snapped. I wasn't going to let her steal this from me. Not my wedding, not my joy, not my dignity. I began thinking clearly for the first time in days. If Clara wanted to play this game, I would play better. I would not confront her, not yet. That would give her power. No, she needed to believe she had already won. That was how I'd take everything back, piece by piece. I took a deep breath and opened my wedding planner, flipping through the pages filled with notes and sketches. I smiled bitterly. You took my dress, Clara, I whispered to the empty room. But you have no idea what you just started. That night, I stayed up until dawn, planning. Not just a wedding, but a reckoning. I would walk down that aisle, not as the woman she tried to humiliate, but as the one who would rewrite the story entirely. She might have taken my dress, but I would take back something far more precious. My moment, my peace, my name. And as the first rays of morning light touched my window, I realized something that filled me with both fear and thrill. I wasn't waiting for revenge. I was already creating it. That empty hanger no longer made me feel helpless. It reminded me of power. Because sometimes when everything is stripped from you, you finally see who you really are. And I was done being the quiet, forgiving sister. Clara might have taken my wedding dress, but I was going to take her wedding day. I didn't cancel my wedding. I didn't scream, accuse, or fight. That's what Clara expected me to do. To lose control, to make myself look small and petty while she played the victim. No, I was done being the sister who reacted. This time, I would be the one pulling the strings. So I smiled. I hugged her, congratulated her on her sudden engagement, and pretended that I was happy for her. Beneath that smile, however, my mind was already turning. Cold, focused, deliberate. She had stolen my dress, my peace, and my spotlight. But she had no idea that I was about to steal something she could never get back. Her perfect image. The first step was silence. Silence confuses people. It makes them uncertain. When you stop reacting, they start second-guessing their own confidence. I didn't tell anyone what she'd done, not even Ethan. I only said very calmly that Clara had borrowed the dress for some photos. Ethan looked furious at first, but then his expression softened. We'll handle it, he said. The steadiness in his voice gave me strength. Whatever she's planning, we'll make sure it doesn't touch you. He didn't ask for details. He didn't need to. His trust alone was enough to remind me why I was marrying him. He believed in me, even when my family never did. Once I had my composure back, I began to plan. The first part of that plan was to replace the dress, but not with a copy. No, I wanted something that made a statement. Something that would tell the world that no matter what Clara did, she couldn't diminish me. I called an old college friend, Ava, who worked as a designer. I told her everything, from the stolen gown to my sister's calculated betrayal. There was a long pause on the phone before she said, "Give me 1 week." Trust me, a week later she unveiled it, a masterpiece. It wasn't white. It was champagne gold, a soft shimmering tone that caught the light like morning sun. The sleeves were hand-embroidered with silver vines and tiny crystals that glowed under the faintest light. It was bold, untraditional, and unforgettable. "This," Ava said, smiling, "isn't just a wedding dress. It's armor." When I tried it on, I understood exactly what she meant. It made me feel powerful. Not like a bride waiting for her happy ending, but like a queen who had already earned it. With the dress ready, it was time for the next part of my plan. I reached out to Luke, Clara's groom-to-be. He seemed surprised when I called. "Oh, hey, I didn't expect to hear from you," he said, sounding uncertain. I smiled into the phone. "Clara mentioned you two were planning everything quickly, so I thought we should coordinate. It'd be nice if our themes didn't clash since it's the same venue." He hesitated, then agreed to meet. Over the next few days, we met a few times at cafes and the venue to discuss decorations and schedules. But honestly, I wasn't there to talk about flowers. I was watching him, listening, testing. Luke was a good man, but I could see the confusion written across his face every time Clara's name came up. When I asked about how they met, his answers didn't quite align with the stories she had told our family. When I mentioned Ethan, he shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. Something wasn't right. I didn't need to expose her lies myself. She was doing that perfectly well without my help. During our third meeting, Luke finally spoke about what I had suspected. "Does she always do this?" he asked quietly. I tilted my head. "Do what?" he sighed. "She gets jealous so easily. She keeps comparing herself to you. I thought maybe it was a sister thing, but lately—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "She told me you tried to stop our engagement. That you didn't want us to be happy," I almost laughed. "I haven't said a word about you two, Luke. If she said that, it's only because she needs a villain in her story." He frowned. "I thought so." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw the doubt in his eyes grow. Clara's web was unraveling, thread by thread, and I didn't even have to touch it. By the time the wedding day arrived, I was calm. Too calm. Clara mistook it for defeat. She strutted around the house, ordering people, boasting about how her wedding was going to be the talk of the town. She even had the nerve to tell me, "Don't be late for the ceremony, sis. I'd hate for you to miss my big moment." I simply smiled and said, "Wouldn't dream of it." Her ceremony was set to start an hour before mine. I stood backstage at my own venue, watching the preparations unfold through a half-open curtain. My heart was steady. I wasn't nervous anymore. I was ready. Then I saw her walk in. Clara, glowing with arrogance, wearing my stolen dress. The sight of it should have hurt, but strangely, it didn't. It almost looked wrong on her, like she was wearing a costume she didn't understand. The dress had been designed to reflect elegance and sincerity, things she didn't possess. Still, she twirled for the cameras, basking in the attention like a peacock showing its feathers. Guests gasped and applauded. My mother beamed. My father teared up. For a brief moment, I almost pitied her, almost, and then fate took over. It happened in seconds. A faint ripping sound as she lifted her arms too quickly. At first, no one noticed. But then the tear spread, right down the back seam. The delicate zipper snapped. Clara froze. Gasps erupted. Someone screamed. In a blink, her veil snagged on the chair behind her, pulling the lace downward, and the entire back of the gown tore open, exposing her slip and bare shoulders to a hall full of people and flashing cameras. The once perfect bride became a spectacle. My mother rushed to cover her, guests turned away in shock, and Luke just stood there, pale, speechless. The chaos that followed was almost surreal. I hadn't planned it, but watching it unfold felt like poetic justice. The dress she stole from me had betrayed her, just as she had betrayed me. I quietly turned away and stepped into my own bridal room. The golden gown hung there, waiting like destiny itself. When I slipped it on, I felt a transformation inside me, calm, radiant, unshakable. I wasn't walking into a competition. I was walking into victory. When Ethan saw me, his expression said everything. His eyes softened, his lips parted, and for a long moment he couldn't even speak. "You look," he whispered. "Like the sunrise," I smiled. "Let's go show them what real love looks like." As we entered our hall, the music began to play softly, a gentle melody that wrapped around the guests like sunlight. One by one, people turned to see me. The murmur died down, and for the first time that day there was silence. Not awkward silence, but reverence. The kind of silence that happens when beauty steals breath away. I saw the photographers rush in, the same ones who had been covering Clara's ceremony earlier. I could imagine the contrast in their cameras. One bride torn apart by vanity, the other glowing with calm defiance. Even my parents, who had been so eager for Clara's moment, stood frozen when they saw me. My mother's hand rose to her mouth. My father whispered something I couldn't hear. Every step I took down that aisle felt like reclaiming something stolen. Dignity, peace, strength. When I reached Ethan, he took my hand and kissed it, and in that single gesture, all the pain of the past weeks melted away. I wasn't just getting married. I was reborn. Somewhere behind the walls of our hall, I could still hear muffled voices from Clara's disaster, shouting, crying, confusion. But none of it touched me. I had built my own world, separate from her chaos. And as I looked into Ethan's eyes, I realized that revenge hadn't made me bitter. It had made me free. When the ceremony ended and applause filled the room, I glanced toward the hallway one last time. Clara stood there, wrapped in a borrowed shawl, her makeup streaked, her pride shattered. Our eyes met for a brief second. She wanted to see anger or gloating in me, but I gave her neither. I simply smiled, calm, graceful, untouchable. Because in that moment, she finally understood. I didn't need to destroy her to win. I just needed to rise higher than she ever could. And as Ethan lifted my hand and the crowd cheered, I knew my revenge was complete, not through cruelty or deceit, but through brilliance, elegance, and the kind of strength Clara could never steal. The days after the weddings were strangely quiet, like the world itself had paused to catch its breath after all the chaos. My phone was still buzzing with messages, mostly from guests who couldn't stop talking about the golden bride. Some wrote paragraphs about how breathtaking my dress was, others about how elegant the ceremony felt, how the love between Ethan and me seemed to light up the room. But I knew there were other whispers too, about Clara's humiliation, about the torn gown, about the way her ceremony had descended into confusion and embarrassment. The story had spread like wildfire through town. Photos had leaked online, videos surfaced, and before I knew it, her disaster was everyone's gossip. My parents were mortified, trying to do damage control, but there was no saving her pride. The irony was painful. She had spent years trying to be the center of attention, and now she was, just not in the way she ever wanted. Luke didn't even stay for the reception. I heard from Ethan later that he left quietly, not saying a word to anyone. By morning, Clara's engagement ring was sitting on our parents' kitchen counter, cold and unwanted. The man she had raced to the altar with had realized, far too late, who she truly was. Every lie she'd told, every manipulation had crumbled in front of him. He told Ethan later that he couldn't marry someone who built her happiness on someone else's pain. And just like that, her fairy tale collapsed. But I didn't celebrate her downfall. That was never what I truly wanted. The satisfaction I felt wasn't from her misery. It was from knowing that for once, I had taken back control of my life. I had refused to let her story define mine. The days following my wedding were a blur of love and calm. Ethan and I took a short honeymoon to the coast, not somewhere extravagant, just a quiet seaside villa where we could breathe. The salty air, the sound of waves, and the soft golden sunsets were all I needed. We spent long hours walking along the beach barefoot, sometimes talking, sometimes silent, both of us grateful for the peace we'd earned. I remember sitting one evening by the balcony, watching the ocean, when Ethan reached for my hand and said softly, "You know, she doesn't deserve the space she takes up in your head anymore." I looked at him, surprised. "You think I still think about her?" He smiled faintly. "Not always. But sometimes, I see it in your eyes when you go quiet." I didn't argue. He was right. A part of me still replayed that betrayal. Not because I missed my sister, but because I was trying to understand it. How could someone I grew up with, shared a room with, laughed and cried with, do something so cruel? How could family envy become that poisonous? I didn't know if I'd ever find the answer. When we returned home, reality hit again. The messages, the gossip, the questions, they were everywhere. Our wedding photos had gone viral, shared by some lifestyle blogs, calling it a symbol of modern elegance. The story of my golden gown fascinated people. They called it brave, bold, and unconventional. They didn't know the truth behind it, and I preferred it that way. Let them think it was all grace and inspiration. The real story belonged to me, and I didn't owe it to anyone else. It was about a week later when Clara showed up at my doorstep. I still remember the sound of the doorbell, sharp, insistent, like an alarm. When I opened the door, I barely recognized her. The woman who stood there wasn't the confident, smug sister who had strutted around in my dress. Her eyes were swollen, her hair unkempt, and her once perfect posture had given way to something fragile, almost broken. She didn't ask to come in. She just stepped inside, uninvited, and stood there trembling. "You ruined me," she said, her voice raw. I stared at her, stunned by the accusation. "Ruined you?" I repeated quietly. "Clara, you did this to yourself." Her lips quivered. "You knew what would happen. You knew that dress would fall apart." I blinked, confused, then realized she was serious. "You think I planned that?" She laughed bitterly. "Don't act innocent. You've always wanted to outshine me." "Well, congratulations. You did." I took a deep breath and steadied my tone. "Clara, you took something that wasn't yours, my dress, my day, and turned it into your own competition. I didn't ruin you. I just didn't stop you from ruining yourself." Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't reach out to comfort her. For once, I wasn't the sister who smoothed over her messes, who made excuses to our parents, who forgave her because that's just how Clara is. No. This time, she had to face what she'd done. "You've always had everything," she whispered, her voice shaking. "You were the responsible one. The one people respected. I was just the pretty one, the one no one took seriously. I thought if I made my wedding bigger than yours, maybe—" She stopped, biting her lip. "Maybe they'd finally see me." For a brief moment, my anger faded, replaced by something else, a quiet, aching sadness. I had spent years envying her charm, her beauty, her confidence. And all that time, she had been envying my stability, my calm, my quiet success. We had spent our lives looking at each other through mirrors of resentment, never realizing that neither of us was truly happy. "Clara," I said softly, "I never wanted to compete with you. I just wanted peace. I wanted us to be happy, both of us." Her shoulders trembled, and for the first time in years, she looked small. "It's too late for that," she whispered. She turned to leave but stopped at the door. "They all hate me now," she said, not looking back. "Mom can't even look me in the eye. Luke won't answer my calls. I can't go anywhere without people whispering." "You took everything." I shook my head. "No, Clara. You lost everything when you couldn't be happy for me." "There's a difference." The door closed behind her, and the silence that followed was heavy, not painful, but final. I stood there for a long while, feeling the weight of years of rivalry dissolve into the air. From that day on, I chose peace. I didn't talk about her. I didn't engage in gossip or defend myself. When people asked about the incident, I simply said, "Family drama." It's over. And it was, for me at least, months passed. My marriage blossomed. Ethan and I moved into a new home, one filled with laughter, music, and quiet mornings that smelled like coffee and sunlight. I hung one framed photograph in our living room, me in my golden gown standing beside Ethan, both of us smiling in the soft light of our wedding day. To anyone else, it was just a picture. But to me, it was a symbol. A reminder that revenge didn't have to be cruel or loud. Sometimes it was simply living better, freer, and happier than the person who tried to destroy you. I found out later that Clara moved out of town. She took a job at a small place, starting over. We didn't talk much after that. But one day, months later, I got a letter in the mail. No return address, just my name written in her looping handwriting. Inside was a single line written in blue ink. I finally understand what you meant. I hope one day you'll forgive me. There was no signature. No apology, no plea, just that one sentence. And somehow that was enough. I folded the letter carefully and tucked it away in a drawer. I didn't need to reply. Forgiveness doesn't always need words. Sometimes, it's simply letting go. A few weeks later, I went through the boxes from my wedding and found the remnants of my old gown, or what was left of it. I had asked the boutique to retrieve it after Clara's ceremony. The fabric was damaged beyond repair, but as I held it, I felt no anger, only closure. I decided to donate it to a charity that helps underprivileged brides. The dress deserved a happier story than the one Clara gave it. Maybe it could make someone else's dream come true. Someone who truly valued it. On the day I handed it over, the woman who ran the charity smiled warmly and said, "It's beautiful." "You're sure you don't want to keep it?" I smiled. "No," I said softly. "It belongs to someone who'll wear it with love, not pride." As I left the small boutique, sunlight poured across the street, golden and soft, just like the color of my gown. I realized then that revenge wasn't about making someone else suffer. It was about reclaiming yourself after being broken and shining so brightly that no one could ever dim you again. Clara had taken my wedding dress, but I had taken back something far greater, my peace, my confidence, my power. And in that balance, I had truly won.